Well, hello, everybody, and that's right, we've got another episode. First in a while. Welcome to Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, a live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. All right, everybody, we got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be overanalyzing that weirdo David Fincher's latest celebration of RT cruelty, the aptly named The Killer. But first, let's give a big welcome to my co-host with the most, my true borscht buddy, the only birder I know, Winnipeg's own Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Good. Just taking a break from cleaning all my guns and Chinese throwing stars, but other than that, just typical Sunday. Yeah.
Well, never mention all those wonderful noms de guerre, those those super original, unique, and creative nom de guerre, and of course all those other the money, the storage facilities. Oh my goodness, who knows? There'd be so much. You're kind of wondering who's doing all that paperwork.
Yeah, I know it's a dream.
All right, Jim, I told you the digital green room before we got started. I did want to ask you, before we got into the spoiler zone on this flick, what did you, and this goes for the folks in the chat, looks like we got Walt65 joining us, which is wonderful.
Hey, Walt.
Yeah, from Walt's Flicks Picks. But here's my question. What do you think that fascinates us so much about the assassin for hire character, especially as hero, or maybe not hero, or at least anti-hero?
Yeah.
But like a kind of in a gray area. What do you think that makes what makes that work for us all?
Yeah, I think what it is that we get. I think what fascinates a lot of people is destruction. And I think it's maybe the same channel, almost, not quite, that gives us the reason behind the fascination behind serial killers, is that you become an agent of, where the character is an agent of chaos without needing, by watching it, you don't need the absolution. You can just behold the chaos. I think because we all build up a life, like everything we do, virtually every minute of the day, is you're educating yourself, or you're learning something, or you're entertaining yourself, and it's all towards creation. Is that these people, these agents, are agents of destruction, and there's a real sort of there's a freedom, I think, in that, a fascination in that. I think it goes pretty deep, but we're able to watch chaos and just sort of, because it's a fictional story in this case, we get to enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, okay, you while you were away last year, maybe it was the year previous, we reviewed guest co-host who's been on the show before, Catherine Johansson and I. We did review Kate, which was kind of imagine the little girl from the Leon the Professional grew up and became contract killer. And that was Mary Elizabeth Winstead starred in that. Other than her, I mean, there have been some, but I would say the majority are men. Do you think part of our attraction, especially to the real cruel ones, is that idea of, what's the word I'm looking for? That idea of unapologetic power.
Yeah.
Like close to the competent man fantasy. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, Alison Gilmore in the Winnipeg Free Press called it competence porn. There's that kind of thing.
Which is something, okay, that's a great phrase, but we've talked about that before, this very masculine idea,
specifically writing about this movie. But yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also the kind of the world building, like how does one? Because they don't always, but they often go into the killer's private life, if there is one. I think part of the other thing too is that these people are all ciphers. They're all puzzles. How'd they get here? How do they function with this kind of strange life too? But
Well, I'm
yeah,
thinking of
I
the.
think.
I mean, he was a villain, but the killer in the Jackal. I
Mhm.
think the book was 7 Days of the Jackal, and then the
Yes,
book
yeah,
or the couple of movies
couple
was
movies.
3 days. Trying to remember, or maybe it was just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Jackal. You know what? Walt's
Was
flicks.
that
Walt.
yeah.
Walt will be able to correct us.
Three
Which one
Days of the
is that?
Condor, I think, and Day of
Yeah,
the Jackal. But
yeah. Pretty sure it was
and when
the
you think
Jackal.
about it,
Oh
there's
yeah,
tons of these movies. I mean, you already cited The Professional. Lately, there's TV shows. Of course, Barry on HBO. In Australia, they have Mr. In Between. I've watched both of them,
yeah.
and they're both really well done and super interesting. I think the catch is whether or not they stick with you is another thing too, or if it's just up there for the sort of the spectacle of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great that's a great point. Walt actually in the chat says it is amazing that we get so invested in the professionalism of the killer.
Yeah.
And yes, my most popular review is The Day of the Jackal. Day of the
Yes.
Jackal.
Yeah.
Thank you, Walt. Day of the Jackal. It's like, this is a
And I believe that's the old one and not the recreation with Bruce Willis. I think was the most recent version.
I mean, it was a f***ing itch I needed scratched. Thank you very much. All right. I think this is going to be something we'll come back to as we go through this film. But I wanted to add my one piece is, and you kind of alluded to it, I think, Jim, but I think one of the things that fascinates us and why when we're following somebody they're always super confident is because then we get to see all the mechanics of being a contract killer. But that very specific, almost like a spy fantasy or something. But anyway, with that, you know what?
Yeah.
I think it's time. I think it's time, Jim, to get back to the flick at hand. All right. Here is the log line, folks. Sorry. What is the flick we're talking about? Oh, right. The Killer. Here's the log line, folks, from Netflix. After a fateful near miss, an assassin. After a fateful near miss, an assassin battles his employers and himself on an international manhunt he insists isn't personal. Jim, I'm going to tell you, that is one of the better log lines, but one of the more inaccurate log lines. You know, sometimes you read like a Wikipedia run through or a log line where it's like, did you watch the movie?
Yeah.
What do you think? Am I wrong on that? Or is that it? A kind of, I'm not sure you saw the whole movie.
Well, you've got a movie with an unreliable narrator, so why not an unreliable log line?
Writer.
Put anything in.
That's it.
After a near miss, he decides to storm the fortress known as Navarone. Just make something up. Does it even matter? I don't know.
with his with his trusty sidekick, Anthony Quinn. Because what the hell? We got all. I don't think he did a lot of television, but
No.
all right, Jim. Let's jump into let's jump into the what do I like to call it? Oh, right, the spoiler zone. All right, everybody. That's right. We are going to be now. Anything goes. Whatever we talk about. It's going to be here. It's going to be spoilers ahead. And the first one I want to ask you about, Jim, is what was the deal? Like every time he had a a fake ID. It was a 70s, and in one case, an 80s sitcom character. You know,
Yeah.
we saw Lou Grant. We saw Reuben Kincaid, who I recognized, but I
Yes.
had to look it up. Like, we got the Partridges, but the only one who seemed, and several others, but the only, Felix Unger,
Oscar Madison. I
Oscar
think, was
Madison,
there.
the other half of the Odd Couple,
Yeah.
Archibald.
Jeez.
What was,
It-
what is Archibald Bunker?
well,
I'm about to
yes,
say, what is Archie Bunker's last name? Archibald Bunker. But Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, the only one where it seemed to be sort of on point was George Jefferson, because he was about to go at least threaten a guy, a guy up in a up in a penthouse way up in the sky.
that's a good point.
He was about to move
Yeah,
on
yeah,
up.
I didn't catch that. There's
Well,
a lot of in jokes in this
yeah,
movie. And
but I'm
if
like,
you're looking
what do
up.
you think was the, like, I could kind of buy that, in all these foreign countries he's in, where they would, oh, hello, Mr. Unger, hello, Mr. Bunker,
Yeah.
hello, that they wouldn't get it, but you know what, the woman at the bank isn't going, what do you, are you with me?
At the very
Do I need a rim shot here now, Mr. Jefferson?
Yeah. At the very start, he talks about the police being fatigued. He says, my job, the success of my job depends a lot on thin resources and law enforcement fatigue or something like that. And
Yeah.
I tend to think that he might be actually projecting a bit as a character. Again, he's not as unreliable as some of the unreliable narrators out there. Holden Caulfield, William
Yeah.
Holden in Sunset Strip, that sort of thing. But, I think he's maybe a bit fatigued. He misses that shot. The near miss is an actual miss.
Well, he did not an actual miss. He just shoots
shot the wrong
a sex
person.
worker who
Yeah.
happened to go in front. How did the Q-tip, the woman played by Ms. Tilda Swinton, the expert in Chapter 5, how did she put it? About sometimes people get in between our eyes and the prize. And it's, just one of the creepiest ways of describing the poor sex worker who,
Yeah.
who is, let's be honest, that woman was murdered, like straight up.
I thought we were entering some Brian De Palma territory here, a little bit. But yeah. So I mean, hold on. What was the original question? I'm
Oh,
getting
jeez.
them already.
All right. Okay. Now I can't remember. You know
Uh-oh.
what? We'll circle back to it, or perhaps Walt in
We'll
the chat
circle
will.
around, yes.
Walt in the chat will remind me of it. And he did though chime in. It was 3 Days of the Condor. The book was either 7 or 10 Days of the Condor. Where we're mushing two movies together, two movies and two books. Were they both Lucari books? Like, I know The Jackal was. Day of the Jackal
I don't
was a
think
Lucari
Condor
book.
was,
I'm pretty
but,
sure.
yeah.
You know what? Moving forward, let's get back to this flick.
Yes.
And I even forgot to ask who was in front of him behind the camera. Oh, well. We'll get that later.
True.
Oh, yes. What do you think? I want to first ask, why do you think he was an unreliable narrator? I didn't actually think he was. I think he was maybe lying to himself, but
Yeah.
what he narrated
Oh, that's
was
right,
what
that's
was
right.
happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
But that was the point that I was working on, was that, he mentions fatigue, and I think he's the one that might be fatigued. We don't know about his previous jobs, if
Yeah.
he's overworked, that kind of thing, but he does miss the shot. And he gets into several positions. He gets into a bigger fight with a larger guy later on in the movie that ideally he shouldn't he shouldn't have got. I mean, none of these guys should get into a fist fight ever. Like
Yeah.
you're supposed to keep the distance and take out the target there. But yeah, he gets uh, into this massive fight with somebody
Yeah.
who gets the upper hand on him for a little bit anyway. But
But
so
I
I
would
think he's
say,
the one.
though, he was
He's
even
maybe a
saying
bit.
he was missing that. Remember in the beginning, he was like,
Oh,
these distant shots and, sometimes just a little close work so he could be
yeah, yeah,
creative, you know?
yeah. I mentioned specifically a slow drowning or
Yeah.
some poisoning or something to
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
effect.
The
But
accident, it looks like something else, versus this
mhm,
sending a message one. I did, though, you mentioned about sleep, and I, I wrote down in my notes about sleep and conscience.
mm,
Like his conscience, because even though he's getting beaten up, like he's on a bit of a mission here. I've got to not just I don't think he's on a vengeance track. Actually, I think it's I have got to stop and eliminate all these people who know where I am and have hurt someone I loved. Although that's another question. How can this guy love? He is a
yeah,
serial killer. But I'm wondering because over the course of the movie, he's all of a sudden he's not wearing headphones to focus or to even just be able to sleep on the plane. Like
mhm,
he's not waking up. Like there is a point where he's actually just going through REM sleep. Like he actually seems
yeah,
to actually get better sleep as he's nearing the end of this mission
mhm.
than,
Yeah. That's a good point.
but what did you think about that? Oh, and
Yeah, I,
Jackal
I
was a
did.
Forsyth book.
Okay.
Was it
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
I did
Frederick
notice
Forsyth.
that.
Thank you.
It reminds me of the old SNL news desk line. Robert Ludlum passed away this weekend, or did he? Anyway, um, yeah, I mean that's a good point, and I did notice that he was getting full sleep, whereas before, the first half of the movie they showed him sort of sleeping in chairs or on tables or being restless or not seeming, all that fully refreshed, and then a
And in
couple of
his
the times he's
narration, talking about
zonked
how
out.
that can set you off,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, so I don't think he's in a great. I don't think he's in as good a place as he is as he describes in that first act there.
Yeah.
The sort of the stalking of the man who, to me, looks Russian, but whatever, in the apartment across the way. And
The
yeah,
dirty
and
old
he
man
makes
who
it.
hires the,
Yeah,
the sex worker.
and he
Actually, you know what? Who
and
am I to kink
our
shame?
our
You know what?
yeah,
And I,
our killer makes a mistake, and
yeah.
and his timing's off. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that way. Maybe not unreliable in that in the most obvious way. It is pretty subtle though, I think.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it is, again, I come back to this. You know what? We're setting the scene of the hyper competent assassin for hire. But as he's getting closer to, and you can almost feel the impatience, there's a tension building up to the kill shot where you can start, it's almost like all that first act narration up to that point is almost like setting us up for the mistake, for this is going to go sideways. It's like he's not sleeping well. He's, all these things he says you have to be able to do the job right if you want to be a success.
Yeah.
Contract killing. And that's where, but it really is the act that kind of breaks everything open.
Mm.
All of a sudden, as tired as he's getting over the course of the next few days, he becomes more competent. Although I did think I wrote in a note, like when he was on his escape out of the, trying to get out of the old WeWork office, which I That was funny.
Yeah.
No more Airbnb for him, nanny cams and all. But
Eesh.
how did I put it, Jim? I don't know if this is something you noticed or anyone in the chat or comments later. Maybe you did. But I made the note. How did I put it? Oh, good grief. Oh, I thought of you, Jim, and your idea of, what do you call it? That Hollywood parking. And then I'm like, and apparently Hollywood garbage trucks that are right on the way to your way out, and Hollywood cabbies. Because he's like, he gets out of making a quick change and, oh, there's a cab. Having been in Paris at night, I'm not saying there are no cabs, but remember that comment. It's not
Not automatic. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, especially with such great public, it's been more like, and he comes out and then he goes into into the metro, But
Yeah.
and then he kind of picks up what's a potential tail to Santo Domingo, and like his ability to turn on a dime and everything, right up to finding the brute, finding like zeroing in on all these people, dealing with, mishaps and whatnot. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of interesting things going on. Another thing too that I was thinking was interesting is who he chooses to spare and who he doesn't. And he doesn't spare too many people. I mean, the and it's not that I like this about it, but it doesn't make him a righteous hitman. Like he kills a cab driver that he didn't have to. You can argue whether or not he killed the secretary, which is pretty, basically he
killed the
her.
secretary. He kills the secretary. Yeah. She's dead.
Yeah.
He just followed through. Like, and this is
that's a pretty horrifying.
I think I'm with you on
her,
this, because this is one of the things that bugs me about this film. And this is one of the reasons I asked the question I did up front about what is it about these folks? Because he is, from the get-go, he's a bad guy. You killed that person who got in between her eyes and the prize. It's like, no, it was just some woman doing her job, bumped off. And then after that, a cabbie who, I get the competent why. Of course, yeah, he's seen him. Like there's going to be no letting him. Whereas the clerk in the cab outfit, there he's able to, when he's able to fake something else, he does, But part of that is to not have too much. That's more about not leaving too many threads.
Evidence, yeah.
Too much evidence behind. Oh, this is guy pulled the gun on me and stole stuff. No one will look for it again. It's the Dominican Republic. But I think with the secretary, Doreen, or Dolores Claiborne.
Yep.
So now I'm just putting names together, right? But I think with Dolores, that is the moment, because right about the midway part, you get that the lawyer's going to get it, but that she gets a little bit of empathy, a little bit of compassion, an iota. We had to see, otherwise we couldn't stay on his side, because he's a piece of shit, I don't care how much he loves his girlfriend. He starts murdering a bystander, like it's more the effectiveness of the film that we want to see him come through. And I think because he did that at the midpoint, we can let him live at the end. And I think that was the key character moment. And it's the projecting. It's like, I'm going to be done with this job after this, but not, I'm going to die after this. Even though I was wondering about that, there's they
know where he lives, or somebody knows. Well,
Storage Wars comment.
Oh yeah.
Storage Wars, the Storage Wars episode when they opened this up, and I'm like, there's a fatalistic when the money
Yeah.
runs out, It's like, oh, it's a guy who just
Well, that
expects to die in the job.
or that he just would let it stay there. He wouldn't. There's nothing traceable back to him, evidently.
Well,
He'd have to
except all
wear a
those
hairnet.
pictures in the ID, maybe, all those
Oh, maybe, yeah,
passports.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
A lot of passports.
But for me, here's an interesting kind of question: is that about 20 minutes in, I think he's making his way back to the Dominican, and there's another guy that he spots on a plane that looks
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, he might be in my mode of business. Then he sees the dog and he gets nervous, and I'm getting nervous for him, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, that must be a movie trick. Or is it that we're feeling sympathy for the character, or that we're so wedded to the story that our heart rates up because we don't want the story to end? Like, how does Fincher do that? And I don't have an answer, but I sort of calmed down after that, but I'm like, oh, I hope he gets away. I'm like, why do I hope he gets away?
Well, I mean, part of it
kind of
is that we spend that first 20 minutes with him. That is the key thing. It is always from his perspective. We never see the movie from anyone else's perspective. And he, in that narration, is always talking to us. We are looking through it. The only time we're not seeing him, that the camera isn't looking at this guy who's doing a thing, is when we're looking through the sights of his gun.
Yeah.
And that is the big, that's the big thing. You know what? So we're seeing this guy. And so by the time he takes a shot, because when he's lining up a shot, you need that relief. You need that release. And you're like, yeah, he's got to get this in, or something might not happen, or I don't know, will the paycheck go through?
Yeah.
Which is, again, why I'm fascinated. I get the mechanics of how we become invested in him and why we sit ourselves in him, the filmmaking mechanics, but it's still like, this guy's a bad guy,
Pretty interesting how that happens, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of I'm sure
Well, the
there's
magic of
species,
film.
devoted to it.
These
exactly,
yeah, absolutely. But it is the magic, or the maybe not the magic, the real power of film, and maybe what Fincher understands at a deep level. It makes me think of. Do you remember Seven? And could you imagine what if he did Seven from Spaces? The character, the bad guy, from his perspective, it'd be like. They're like, cut her head off.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, we do have a weird fascination. It's not just the power of film. I think there's something about us being attracted to a character who does terrible things because it's something we won't do.
Yeah, yeah. Or just, for me, it's also chaos. It's that sort of that attraction of chaos when all our lives are so orderly. Or an attempt to be. You should see my basement.
Or even an idea that there's a world under our own world.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, an underworld.
Normies. Civilians.
Yeah. As he was commenting about the expert, Tilda Swinton's character. Walt65 says, very interested that in, quote, Hollywood, close quote, films, we need to have some kind of sympathy even with the killer, and that is far less needed in foreign films which don't fret about such tropes, or, at least audience expectations. Yeah. Look at how we feel about Alex in A Clockwork Orange and all the stuff he does. And, that's a great point, Walt. And I think that, again, it comes to the power of film to put us in that guy's perspective, Yeah. Well, now let me ask this, Jim. Why, and to you, Walt, in the chat, or anyone else who's floating in, doesn't look, well, you know what, I did start it crazy late, so. Why did Fincher decide to put this in the, I'm going to call him, he is a bad guy, or it's at best he's an anti-hero. Yes, apparently he can love his girlfriend and, be loyal, to his brother-in-law of sorts. Even give a little bit of a, all right, I'll kill you, make it look like an accident, not just disappear you.
Yeah.
But why do you think Fincher decided this is the story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, other people, also Allison Gilmore, sort of surmised that it's deconstruction of the hitman story. There's something about the, he doesn't have nice suits and he's dressed like a tourist, and there's a few other things that he flies coach, and it's not sort of it's not like a luxurious kind of thing. He doesn't have this sort of easy life. It's not like Robin Leach and the Lifestyles of the Rich and Deadly or anything like that. But I
Well,
almost
until you get
wonder.
to his home.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's,
you're
not,
absolutely right. It's very much like all his covers, like except for George Jefferson. All his
yeah.
cover identities were pretty schlubby. I was even trying to figure out is maybe the
Yeah.
almost a bucket camper hat, but that pork pie hat that he was wearing throughout pretty much every place he goes to. He puts that
Different
hat on for a while.
Yeah,
Finds one of
yeah.
those, and I was wondering. I was trying to maybe we've seen all those TV characters in them. Anyways, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, no, well, and I almost so yeah, I think it's sort of I agree that it's maybe a form of deconstruction of the of the hitman of the cool hitman character, but I would almost take it a little bit farther. I will say that, I mean, overall it's a super watchable movie. Went by really quickly. I was interested in the whole thing, the whole time. I think it's got a running time of 2 hours, or almost 2 hours. Yeah, so it was an interesting movie, but having Fassbender, who's not, he's a handsome guy, he's in shape and that kind of thing, and he, despite that sort of, despite the what he's wearing, he still projects some form of cool. I'm not going to say he was miscast, but I'll take a page from What We Do in the Shadows, and they have a fellow vampire who's an energy vampire, Colin Robertson or Robinson. I wrote it down, and he's so boring that he saps all the energy from people. That's how and I was thinking, he's bald and he's sort of schlubby, and I was thinking, well, what if you cast it? You'd have to find somebody who's compelling enough to watch for 2 hours. But I would almost say that they should have gone a little farther in the casting of somebody kind of plain and or schlubby, rather than the super fit, renowned guy for being handsome, Michael Fassbender. Yeah, again, wouldn't say it's a mistake because he's watchable and stuff, but I think if you wanted to deconstruct it a little more, you get somebody that's just sort of looks like a dad, like, yeah. But yeah, this guy's a race car driver. He's obviously in good shape, and he's got the chin and everything else, and yeah, even despite him trying to be not cool, it's like a war movie trying not to glamorize war. Very few of them do it.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but do you think that? But that's the thing. I'm not sure about that. I don't think he is trying to deconstruct it. There's a part of me. It's like he is really enamored of the aesthetics of violence. And the aesthetics of cruelty. Like I was only being a little facetious in my intro. Like the care he takes with cruel moments, like right down to the the nail gun in Buddy's, like his lawyer, the lawyer's chest,
Yeah.
the way he dies, and this we see in so many of his movies, you know, that kind of arty sort of, like all his villains are, you know, aesthetic, you know, I observe the world, I'm not of it, almost in a way. And they're very
Yeah.
enamored of their own intelligence, and they have their own mantras and that, but they're almost monk-like. And even because at the beginning, I'm pretty sure it was out of the Bible. He says, I can't remember who said it. And I'm like, I think it was in the buddy. Sorry, in the Bible. But I am going to watch this movie again. But
Well, the price
yeah,
is right.
I'm I do, like, there's a part of me that is like, I'm wondering if it's the aestheticism of violence and the aestheticism of cruelty that he's enamored of. Like, an example of that would be, Jim, you know what, I think I remember clearly the beats and if I really, you know, if I think the ideas, the general narrative of every movie I've seen of his, they're unforgettable. And they have a unique, like, he is an auteur, like, you know, in that cahiers de cinema definition of an auteur, he is that. But Jim, he's no David Mamet of dialogue. He's more David Mamet of visuals and mood and aesthetics, you know?
Yeah. 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 You know, it's, I mean, yeah, what he was going for here, just,
Yeah, what is the theme here? What is this?
Yeah.
What is he saying? You know?
Well, I think one of them is if you notice, almost every relationship that the killer, who doesn't have a name, of course, by the way, is transactional, except for the relationship.
Much like
with,
the jackal.
Yeah, with his girlfriend and his evident brother-in-law, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that this movie is heavy on the corporations. So he's good at using weapons. He's also really good at Amazoning. He's good at plane
Car
ticketing,
rentals.
car rentaling. You know, there's a lot of other skills that he has. But yeah, I mean, and he's got to balance all the. I thought
he's
so
good at
many
anonymity
identities.
in the modern world.
Yes, and I think there's a line later on when he's going to confront the client, you know, that's sort of chapter 6.
Arliss Howard.
And he says, DoorDash, he says, you know, when you think your building's locked down and the billionaire wants a watermelon iced tea, or I can't remember what it was, you know, or the building's locked down until the billionaire wants a watermelon iced tea. And I thought to myself, I think what this is, and him too, we're all consumers. Like, he thinks he's above the fray, but he's just as much of a customer as anybody else. It's just that he consumes things for a slightly different reason.
Well, but he also is aware of how that flow works. I remember I was trying to say about aestheticism, and I totally forgot. This is the first movie that I think I'll remember lines of. Because other than what's in the box, I don't remember a key line in any Fincher film.
I think Neil Patrick Harris said, "We're from Winnipeg" in Gone Girl, and my wife and I cheered in the theater as Winnipeggers only.
But do you know what I mean? Like, that was my Mamet reference, and I forgot the middle part.
Yeah. A quick note here. Quick note: when he kills his boss with the nail gun, he says, "Well, I'm estimating the time here, and I just pumped 3 9-inch nails into you, and
6
that
to
should give me
7
6 or 7
minutes.
minutes." Do you know the 9-inch nails reference is Trent Reznor did the soundtrack. Trent Reznor's band, of course, is 9-inch nails. So, you know, very obvious reference to the composer.
But that gives
And
me that leads me to another question for you, Jim. There is an absolute ton, and I mean a ton, of the Smiths.
yeah,
Like and a almost every like it's all those songs that I got into of the Smiths in the late
yeah,
80s. It's like, oh, I recognize this one, I recognize, oh, that I don't. But all the
yeah,
others, and we hear that less and less over the course of the film.
yeah.
But it just makes me not just the soundtrack, but the soundscape he designs. Like I almost
Mhm.
want to watch it, or not watch it, have it up and only listen to it, because there is sometimes it's a cacophony and
Mhm.
a racket, and then sometimes it's quiet and you can hear a soundtrack, and then it's like, oh, he's wearing earbuds or headphones, you know.
Mhm.
What did you take from that? What did you take from his use of the Smiths? Especially like Big Mouth and that, where it's like, oh, that's more you know,
Mhm.
violent imagery towards
Yeah,
women.
yeah,
You know, but
yeah.
what were your thoughts? How
And
did you
all
react to that?
closing the whole closing credits are Smiths as well, or like a whole song of the
Yeah.
Smiths. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. There's a couple things too. He doesn't really play too many lines in their full intact way. Like he
No.
usually does that full. You can hear it, and then they're on his earbuds, so you can still hear it, but it sort of cuts a lot of the lines in half. There's one reference to love, and just before he says the word love, it cuts out. But
Which I'm
I
sure there's meaning to that. Like
oh yeah,
this is not a guy who's like, yeah, yeah, sure, fine.
somebody how soon is now? Somebody mentioned that that I was watching was the rifle sight was kind of focusing right into that part of the song. But
Yeah.
so yeah, full disclosure, I'm a huge Smiths fan. The last concert I went to before COVID was Morrissey, even despite his sort of weird politics these days.
Well,
But
let's call it what it is, Jim.
yeah,
He's a nasty old racist. He's
yeah,
become a
yeah,
nasty old racist. Him, Clapton, all these '70s punks. It's like, unlike Bowie, who flirted with fascism as well, that's a great way of organizing a society. He at least kind of, oh, I got kids, and oh, this doesn't make sense. I'm embarrassed. Let me walk back what I was saying when I was younger. You know,
yeah,
these guys, it's almost like they're like that Susie Sue. Hey, I was just doing cosplay. All these folks have turned like
yeah.
Mosley British Union of fascists. Sorry.
Once you get a bank account, then
Anyway,
it sort of changes, I guess.
yeah.
But so
I'm wondering if they were always nasty, you know, kind of
oh yeah,
that. I'm wondering. Anyway, back to
the
Morrissey's the use of the music here.
I think the Smiths tend to hit you when you're more in your teens and 20s. I don't know a lot of 45-year-olds that if introduced to them, they'd be like, okay, this is my band. So I stumbled on them probably in my university years anyway.
Yeah, that was me too. Like it was like
Yeah,
mid
and
late
I
'80s, you know.
after they were broken up, so once again late to the
Yeah,
party, thanks a lot. And so I was like, who
we
are
had some
these
cool
guys?
stuff.
Oh yeah, great songs, great sense of melody, but I usually associate that with being younger. Our hero or our anti-hero in this is probably in his late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah,
I'm thinking that, music that might appeal to teens and people in their early 20s, maybe we're talking character-wise, we're talking about somebody with a little bit of an arrested development. Also the reference to, maybe he was a TV kid. He grew up on TV. If you're going to write
yeah,
a backstory for him, all the names that he uses, all the aliases,
yeah. They're
all
all
the
TV
alii,
characters.
they're
Yeah,
all TV characters from a certain era.
yeah,
So
yeah.
which is
Only
sort
one
of
from the '80s,
aligns with
Sam
you.
Malone.
Yeah,
I wrote
yeah,
them all down.
yes, yeah. So I'm thinking that this is a person who's maybe got some form of an arrested development. Also, it's kind of
Could have.
neat to
Oh,
every once in a while somebody apparently the Smiths are charting again currently, and somebody brings a band back. shines a light on them, and they, like people say, "Oh, this music was great." So maybe there's a little bit of a, what we should. I think the Smiths would really work in this as in several different ways, and make us look
Well,
like geniuses.
I wonder if it's also just there's an angsty individualism, an angsty sadness, poignancy to those Smiths tunes. An antisocial thing, but they're aesthetically pleasing. No one's going, no one's going, oh, that's rock and roll. There's nothing, there are no rough edges in any of those Smith tunes. They are, I don't mean that they're over-engineered. They're just really tuned, maybe would be the best, or the best word I can think of now. And that kind of going back to I think those themes that Fincher is fascinated with, that asceticism, even some of he does, and again, I'm thinking of Big Mouth, where it's like, oh, you listen to the words and it's like, ooh, that's problematic.
Well, there's some defiance there too, like shoplifters of the world unite, and that kind of thing, which is not a love song. It's more just sort of one of those, I don't know, awareness songs or calls to action.
Walt calls it the Bittersweet Deluxe. So I like that.
Yeah.
That's an album name, Bittersweet Deluxe.
Yes. By the Psychedelic Furs.
What about this? Maybe I come back to the again. Other there are some really solid lines in this flick, and I think actually going to just some great storytelling. There's weak storytelling here as well, but some great storytelling. What was it? It's really the first act is done, and now we're changing over into the second act. The new mission has been declared, right? And he's like, and he looks at his brother-in-law. Let's call him his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
He's got his not a girlfriend, his common law wife, his common law spouse. And there's the brother-in-law, and how he's like, listen, we've never pried. We get that there's some things you can't talk about, but basically, this is my sister. And he stops him, and not in like, it's a really great moment because it's not your typical hyper-masculine posturing. He's not, don't you worry, I'm gonna, it's not a taken moment. I have a special set of skills. There's no, he doesn't growl. He just sincerely, he's just open-faced. And he's just like, it's actually the first time you get some emotion that isn't, paranoia or, him just trying to manage, his lack of sleep or whatever. Like where he's like, this, I say nothing like this will ever happen again or something to that effect. Yeah, and I'm like, and I wrote it down and I'm like, it's just a great turn. Like that's a great turning moment, and the way, and there's some great.
Shouldn't have been allowed to happen or something like that.
Or, something. Yeah. And it's just, but it's not delivered like it. It's it's that great mix of direction and performance. And writing, somewhere in there, like it's all bundled into just a great storytelling moment that does subvert the trope, like it's still saying the thing that needs to be said to move us into the second act, but it doesn't give it in the same way that we're used to. And I loved that. I just thought that was awesome. Was there any great moments for you, Jim, where you're like, wow, that's not it. I'm getting what I need here, but not in the expected way.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at some of my notes here. We haven't sort of talked about the last, the final act there. and that sort of thing that he decides. Yeah, in terms of lines,
Well, doesn't I
yeah,
said moment. Is there any?
yeah,
Yeah. Moving on.
yeah,
Here's a component I did not buy. And this was one of those ones where it's like you almost kind of wonder, was the first guy a red herring, or even just it was just his own paranoia. There'd be I'm sure there's some Fincher interview where either he plays it coy or says, yeah, no, that was the whole idea of getting in his headspace of how
mhm.
paranoid he is. Because it's once he gets off, he ditches the guy that he thinks is following him,
Are
and
you talking
he
about Blue Socks?
yeah, Blue Socks. And
Blue, what happened to the Blue
as he's going
Socks?
home, all of a sudden, as he's driving on that highway, and it becomes the sound, the cacophony recedes because the
Mhm.
airports are always really loud, and we're hearing like just lots of noise, and you feel tense just because of that racket, right?
Yeah,
But as soon as he's on that highway driving home, but from there, it's like, you're trying to catch an international spy, and the cigarettes, and all the evidence left, and even Tilda Swinton in her thing, it's like, well, we're all, there's a reason, and you're getting weak, or like trying to get under his skin, and it's like, I don't know, he managed to find you and the partner, and he's laid waste without you even seeing him coming.
hmm,
Looks like he's the better one at this, because you
yeah,
couldn't, like even the brute, that
hmm,
character, the brute, he's like, I don't think that's a guy who ends up in prison 6 months after he gets out. Not, not a guy who's hired by a guy who, arranges high level hits.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, no, that's the guy you hire to go. That's the guy who gets hired to beat up a bar owner and f***s up on the way there.
yeah,
Gets pulled over
yeah,
by the cops for a busted light and gets in a fight with the cop. It's like,
yeah.
you were supposed to, you had one job.
Guy played Sauron, evidently, as
Yeah.
well, New Zealand
Oh,
actor.
did he? Oh,
So, yeah,
but
yeah,
that's what I mean. I think that was there. It's there. We got what we expect, but I never
mm,
felt worried for him. Even the fight he has with them, and it's like, well, we know how this is going to go. He has to have a fight.
mhm,
I just didn't. I was like, yeah, none of these guys aren't that. These two, the brute and the expert, are like, well, yeah, he's a brute. So what was he doing there at all? And and they don't even cover their tracks. They come
yeah,
out, they don't clean up, they don't cover their tracks.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
What did
mean,
you think?
it's sort of, I guess they all feel kind of invulnerable and they all kind of screw up. So maybe that's a little bit of the subversion of the genre, that these people aren't like machines. They're not all knowing, all seeing owlmen. That they do screw up, and that they aren't as cautious as they think they are. And that's a lot of what he's telling us. Oh, he has to get his heart. He concentrates on all the protein that he eats, and he's got to get his heart rate below 60 in order to get a good shot
Yeah.
off, and that kind of thing. And you know, I think
So for that
control
level of
it
competence,
yeah,
then you
and I
send, the
yeah.
the suburban mom and the thug.
Well, and also they thought he was there. So is it sort of like you're setting up, a Hollywood stuntman and Tilda Swinton, who Tracy Morgan called David Bowie on SNL. But you
That
send
was the Star
them,
Wars casting, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to counter our killer, because they thought he would have been there, but it was just the girlfriend, of course. Yeah, it's a weird one. But I'm thinking it speaks to that there's a sort of an infallibility gulf here, that I think all the characters think they have, and or they don't think they have, and they
No.
actually do. Like their time comes to an end. Maybe it's a complacency thing. We get the impression that these are all veterans. They've been doing this for a while, to the point where Swinton, you'd think you'd be a little bit more aware. He drives right up to her car and is able to look in, and she's just sort of in dream world. She's just
Well,
sort of
this is
staring
what I
blankly
mean.
ahead.
Like I just don't. It's like, yeah, they were easy. Like he did not have. Once he gets the identities, he has no obstacles. In a lot of ways, the movie's over at the midpoint.
Yeah.
The rest is just,
Finding out.
cleaning up. Yeah, we need to know who these people are. We need to see this. Like it's not really I wouldn't call this a thriller. It's almost a mystery, right? Like we got to find out who they are, why they did it, kind of like
Procedural.
yeah.
Hitman procedural.
Well, you know what? I
All
mean,
right.
it's within I would call it in the crime super genre. Like, I mean, it's just from the criminal's perspective. Shout out to Walto. I think that we'd kind of nailed this. He goes, if you watch a documentary on the gazelle, you cheer for the gazelle getting away. If you watch the lion, you want to see the lion get the gazelle. And yeah, that's it. That's the magic of film. The point of view. If we start with this person, we want that person to succeed because we are that person. Coming back to this flick, though, what, if anything, do you think Fincher wants us to take away from this film?
Well, like a crime story reflects the society that it's portraying.
That he thinks it portrays.
That he thinks it
Yeah,
portrays.
his idea
yeah.
of society. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's all through the writer, of course, or the eyes. Yeah. Again, I think it's reflection on today's society, the transactional nature of relationships. It's going to sound boring, and it sounds like but the corporatization of America, like all these. He stays in chain hotels. He orders from Amazon. There's it's all big. It's all he rarely, except for his girlfriend and his brother-in-law, he doesn't really. They don't show him really having any conversations even with people which isn't a transactional thing. So I think it's just. It's taking a look at this society and figuring it out that we're all, from the hitman to the client to the everyone else. I think it's a big commentary on, and this could just be me on being a consumer.
You know what? I think you're giving him too much credit here.
You think
Like
so?
first of all, because it's about a hitman in his world.
Yeah.
This is the way the world works. I don't know. Do you know?
It's a cold world.
Do you know
like
a hitman?
No.
No. But if you're a
it's
hitman,
cold world.
all those things make sense. Now, this is, I'd say, the world they put us in. Like if you lived two lives, if you had to be, you would travel through the world that way. The world would be cold because you're a cold-hearted killer. Literally.
Yeah.
Your whole MO is being, like you think of a lot of his narration is like mantras to himself to get him through his job, remind himself, focus, no empathy, all these things that actually aren't part of our lives. We connect with others. We have empathy for them. He may not contribute to charities, but you know what? We do. We have friends and families. We have hobbies. You bird, for crying out loud, Jim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If Fincher thinks that this is the world, that's because Fincher is a cold-hearted guy, not necessarily though this is the world. Like, but I don't even, I'm not necessarily willing to say that he is. I think you're right, except that you miss that, well, it is about an assassin for hire.
Yeah.
It's like, and we don't actually see any normal people. We don't,
Civilians.
except for the doctor. Remember at the beginning, because the only people he may know in a way are, well, the brother-in-law, and there was, remember the doctor, and he's handing out money, and she just looks at him like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there is that little bit of friction between the above world and the world below,
Yeah.
and it's this woman saying, yeah, I'm not taking your money. I'm not saying she knows he's an assassin, but I am saying she knows. It's like, yeah,
Come
no,
on.
your money's dirty. You're dirty and your money's dirty. And I think that's a key moment, illustrating like he does live in this awful world, but because of the choices he makes through the film, just as he gets better sleep, if we were to continue past the last scene, maybe he starts to connect with the world and it looks less cold and consumerist and detached, because he's no longer living a double life. Except for all those storage facilities that they just run out, and then storage wars.
I get what you're saying, but to me too, it's a world where this is allowed to happen, where you can be it's not and I'm not saying this is a historical document or anything, but it's not a series of small towns that you can, that everyone would know. Like, I'm reading Killers of the Flower Moon right now.
Yeah.
And people know when a stranger walks through town, and it's not that anymore. It's not that kind of thing anymore. It's a landscape that allows you to
They've been saying that for 100 years. It's the modernity and how it's destroyed. That's a conservative worldview.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily good or bad, but that's not new. And I don't think that actually bears. I don't think we can observe in the real world that that's not true. That if that were the case, we're all that disconnected, there is no Black Lives Matter. There's no big protests. No one cares because we're all disconnected. George Floyd was just a guy who had some bad luck that nobody really noticed. There is a reason these things happen. There's a reason why, we get upset, and then we act. We hear about a disaster and we act. What's going on in Palestine/Israel? People are acting on both sides, good and bad, but that is because they feel emotionally moved and connected to what's going on. And those folks are like kind of going, I'm upset about this, but I'm going to act in a charitable way. I'm going to do these things. Fincher may have that worldview, but I think it's...
Yeah,
I'm
not saying he's right. I'm just saying I think that's his idea of the world in which the killer
I'm not 100% sure
around.
that is it. Because again, if you look at those moments when he's with his girlfriend, or when he's with his common law spouse, the brother-in-law, the way the doctor acts, I think it's a commentary on that life. And maybe it's more his fascination with these characters that live these double lives, that are outside, that they're disconnected from the regular world, maybe.
Yeah.
Although even that, I might be giving him too much credit, because holy crap, could we get through one of these movies without the first death, the first senseless death, being some sex worker, and never to be thought of again? That, I think, is a huge criticism on Fincher. It's like, geez, for sakes, buddy, really? And that the guy gets away with it. Never mind the other ones, because any of his other stuff, like anybody else who's died, you could say, oh, that's self-preservation. the cabbie, like,
Yeah.
some of these other folks who died, they were part of the system he's in. So you could kind of make an argument that, well, he's they're all bad people, they're all going to die that way anyway. But the, even Dolores going, I have children, and he has an empathetic moment. Yeah, I think there's something else going on that isn't about some grand thing about society. I think it is more about he just really loves to explore these characters.
Yeah.
And he really is into violence.
Yeah.
Like he loves it. He loves looking at it. He loves taking it apart, and he loves the aesthetics, like to make it beautiful. I got to admit, there's a bizarre part, or like a dark part of me that wants to see him make a war movie, because, just to see what he'd do with that violence.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why he's always kept it to the individual, because then he can really get into the details. Yeah, I do. I think he's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
His films have creepy themes. Like, Seven was not about good or evil,
Yeah.
Even Gone Girl, it's like, what was,
Yeah, that's pretty.
like they're like what's another one I want to, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. You see the original the original one, the Swedish one, and it's like, I think that is I like that movie more. His version is more antiseptic. It has no rough edges. It's got very little, in a way, sympathy. Actually, it has no sympathy, I would say. There's very little sympathy for any of the characters, whereas in the Swedish version, there's this idea. It's like, yeah, people in the child welfare system can get fucked over by pieces of shit. That that child abuse is wrong, not a thing to, the aestheticism of the killer who is the son of. It's like, what the man,
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well.
I can't.
Maybe I'm being a little harsh.
I haven't seen either of those. I'm frankly not. My wife read the book, and
it's a hard. Like, they're difficult films to watch because they are so into the cruelty and the torture, and there's a part of me wondering that one of the reasons it doesn't get as gory in this film is it's Netflix going, we got to put this on television eventually.
Yeah,
you'll have your feature film time, but then
this is a Thanksgiving movie.
It's the day before Armistice Day that we're going to release it. Can you work with us here, Mr. Fincher? Mm-hmm. All right, Jim. You know what? I think it's time. I've got so many other notes. There is, for all my moaning, there is a lot. You see, he is an auteur. And there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. There's a solid resolution. That he has something aesthetically and mood-wise to say. I'm not saying that he is not a guy who makes intellectual comments. That doesn't mean he's not I think of the Smith songs. This isn't, here I'm making a deep comment about X or Y. It's more, I'm making a deep aesthetic statement about X or Y. And maybe that's it. I'm zeroing in on something here, Jim.
Sure.
But let me ask you. Maybe it's time to get into final thoughts here.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll start with. I want to start with one more question here. Let me consult my notes. There was a good line here. It's interesting that an active practitioner would, be in a suburbs adjacent living situation. But
Yes.
how does this guy? Because we are given this impression, like for the first 20 minutes, it's like, well, this is a serial killer. And then you find it's like I think he does love that woman. His Magdala, I think is their name.
Yeah.
Her character's name. But why do you think, Jim? How does this guy love? How does somebody who does that? How can he have a girlfriend?
Well, we don't really have any sort of, or much, I think, except for clues. I think we've discussed a little bit of his interior life. And
Even
we're
though he
frankly
does
not-
narrate his,
Yeah. I mean,
that's interesting, actually. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we were given some moments. I mean, mostly it's after her getting beaten up and cut up by these other two agents. But yeah, we're not given that much time with them together. And the other thing too is that sometimes if somebody, they're good at acting normal. This is a whole other kettle of fish, but a lot of times if people are sort of, I don't know, they have a distance to them, or they're cold, or they're able to pull something like this, or they're whatever, they know how to act. They act normally. They act like they can be in a loving relationship when really they're just going through the motions because they've seen other people do them.
But I don't think
so
that's
I
this
sort of,
character.
we're not given that
That's
many
not the
clues.
character they're trying to indicate by given his behavior for the movie. After that turning point, he acts in a way that he's trying to protect what he loves and to go back to it. His money gets Mr. Jefferson's money gets moved to his Caribbean accounts.
That's true. Yeah. But
we see
I don't know
him with his spouse, with his common law wife. And this is one of the things, maybe it's a problem I have. It's like, I don't see how this guy's capable of love.
No,
And
they
yet
don't fully develop it, really.
the storytelling is saying that he is, and that he does love this woman, and he's trying to protect her and his life with her. So you're like, that's a story problem, I'm thinking.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that you needed a little more of, and that may have been, like, there's not really a good scene of dialogue between the two. There's a few lines, but nothing substantial.
And I don't even think that was that great a scene after.
No.
No.
We're showing her twice. Both times she's lying down.
Yeah.
Once in a hospital bed, the other time in a chaise lounge or something in their backyard, and she really doesn't say much. I mean, she's still a little bit bandaged up the second time, but yeah.
Well, and that comes both again back to this. Even one of the problems I have with maybe Fincher's oeuvre, you gotta kind of wonder. You know what? There are a lot of women actors who want to work with him, and that there's all reports are like, we're not hearing stories like we hear about Tarantino. Not that Tarantino's a creep, but the way he just, abuses his actors, like through, no, get in that car. It'll be fine. We really need the shot. You know, we don't hear things like that from Fincher. We hear the usual, he likes a million takes. But in his films, what do we start on a sex worker, a transgressive sex worker. She's a dominatrix. So she's the one who dies in the first scene, not the target. And no mention of her after that. Just somebody who got between the eyes and the prize. And then the girlfriend gets tortured. So it's almost like, he didn't, it's like, I can't do girlfriend's head in the box again, or people will start to think I'll torture her and I'll just kill the hooker. Like this is Dolores, who, she may know what's going on and everything, but she's still just the support worker, the secretary, and Dolores has to die. She knows she's going to. She has a last, her last 5 hours are pretty hellish. And at best that she'll die so her kids can get her life insurance. It is like, this is that's not a good look. I'm not sure if I could. I would love to hear. I'm gonna have to search up like feminist critiques of the film, right? Because there may be something I'm really missing. I'm not that, up on feminist analysis that I could say. But I got to admit, there's some red flags. Maybe that's it.
There's 4 women in this film, with the biggest speaking parts, not including counter attendants and ticket people, and they all pretty much meet some form of violence, and 3 of them die,
and including one. It's like it's hinted at that she is sexually assaulted his girlfriend, but that there was worse, and it's like, what kind of images are you trying to draw?
Yeah.
And I think that's again, he's got a fascination with violence. And does he have a fascination with violence? I'm thinking in Seven, some of the victims there were men. I think most of them were men, maybe, but no. Sex worker got it. In his lust thing, a sex worker got it in a horrific way. Like it. Yeah, you just like, Mr. Fincher, do you have a problem with women? Because they meet some horrific demise, and I don't care how you describe it. Like this actually, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I think I'm on firmer ground here. It's what motivates our hero, the girlfriend. Elise wasn't found in a fridge, but it's close.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to go back and watch every single movie now, and and
that's the thing. I don't want to, because a lot of these images, I don't want rolling around in my head.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't need that. I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm just looking up. Did he do Mank?
Yes, he did.
Watched that. I wonder how violent that gets, but
you know what? That one I've avoided mostly because it's like, this sounds ridiculous.
It doesn't sound violent enough.
Orson Welles had nothing to do with the success of the thing he directed. A guy who like on this hot streak forever, but no, it was the writer.
Yeah.
Jesus. I mean, the part of me is wondering, it's like, did Fincher do a deal with the devil? And the devil came and said, listen, I've always been the writer, never the director. You're going to make a movie. This is how you pay for your soul. You're going to make a movie that makes the writer look good. And yes, we're going to take this drunken womanizer and you're going to make him the hero. That's that's how you pay for me giving you all this success.
It's a hot take.
Actually, that's also good. That might be a nice comedy side bit. In better hands. All right,
Yeah.
listen, I think it's time to wrap it up.
Sure.
World 65, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
And whoopsie, wrong one. Everyone else, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, ringy-ding that bell. All right.